Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Industry Talks. This is Wayne Bennett with ECRM and Range Me, and I'm glad everyone could be listening in today. We have a special guest today, and I will introduce him in a minute. But today's presentation and conversation is about the road you will travel. Today's conversation is for the young, newly minted industry professional who is entering our industry, and we will have the conversation about who, what, where, how, and why, what you need to do to grow your career in this very gracious, important, ever-changing industry. And with us today, many of you may know Peter Thompson. Peter Thompson joins us today with over 40 years of industry experience. Let me tell you a little bit about Peter and why I believe he's in a very good position to have this conversation with us today. Peter began his career in 1980 with the Bennett Company. Many of you may remember that company. And then in 1984, he went to go work as a division manager for Revlon. Then, after that, he went to a company known as Schering Plough, where he was the youngest in history regional vice president to join the company. In 1996, during his time at Schering Plough, he became the senior director of trade development, which I believe, Peter, is when we first met.
That's correct.
That's right. Then in 1990, and then in 2003, his role was expanded, where he then, I believe, at that point, joined the Colgate-Palmolive Company, where you continued to lead trade and industry affairs, but also then created and was lead in the Global Innovation and Technology Complex, which was a cross-functional center of excellence where science, logistics, innovation, and retail aisle management all came together as a center for his key retail partners to collaborate and innovate. Then in 2019, Peter retired and started today his company, The Art of the Possible. Art of the Possible is a leadership coaching and development team mentoring around business transformation and the focus of developing young talent. So today, with that in mind, we're going to discuss with Peter. So Peter, good to see you. Where does this video today find you?
So I'm in my world headquarters, also known as my home,
Okay.
out here in Long Valley, New Jersey.
Excellent. It's a good place. So Peter, let's get into this conversation. I'm curious to know your vantage point, your perspective. You know, I just came back from the Jacob Javits Center. I was at a big national trade food show, and I noticed lots of young people, a lot of young companies, a lot of young people. What in today's environment does an emerging company need to do to break through in today's retail environment? What are the must-haves? What are the must-dos and must-not-dos?
So I think, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. When we first spoke of the idea to do this, I really enjoy at this stage in my career the opportunity to give back and to provide a roadmap to help others. So I wanted to thank you for that at the get-go. But in regards to your question, I think it's important that, first of all, in order to stand out today and to be considered relevant, you have to have a reason for being. You have to have a reason for being on the shelf, being in the store, being on the website, and being available to the consumer with a reason. Second, I think companies that are purposeful in their reason for being are doing very well right now, and that is that the consumer understands not only the product but what the company stands for, and that the company stands for the right long-term things that matter, like sustainability, etc. And then I also think you have to be willing to listen to the retailer and to the consumer and provide them what they want. So if you have the opportunity to be nimble and to be quick, I think that's an advantage in today's marketplace. And some of the things that I don't think you can be quiet on the topics that matter today. So it's not really a don't do, but I think you must be involved in today's environment on all the fronts that matter. So that if I was starting a company, if I was trying to be relevant, those are the things I would consider.
And Peter, so, you know, for a young person today entering our industry, and you've got 40 years of experience, you've mentored, you've trained a lot of young people during your career, coming into the industry for the first time, you know, today, what do they need to do at their job to succeed, and how can they advance their career in this very ever-changing, somewhat turbulent business environment?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, I've watched the evolution over the last couple of years of a changing business environment. And I have to say at the start, I have four children ranging in age from 36 to 28 that are, two of them are in our industry. So I've maintained a pretty good pulse on watching them come into the industry at a time when for the one, it was very difficult and very different. So the first thing I think you need to do today to be successful, and it really hasn't changed much, is you have to be a student of our industry. You really have to immerse yourself and learn about our industry, learn what makes it tick, learn all of the different components of the industry. So learn what matters in finance, learn about logistics, learn about marketing, learn about product development, innovation, technology, learn about all of the different touch points, e-commerce, learn about everything that you don't know about. So one is, I would say, be a student. Two is really hone your interpersonal skills. If we are set to meet remote, you must be very strong interpersonally over this type of environment to succeed. So I would get your interpersonal skills in order. I would be curious. I would want to learn. I would want to be a student of the game. And then I would get out in the stores, whether a manufacturer or retailer, I would get out in the environment. I would also get into stores that you don't currently do business with. So when I was coming up, we always went to the stores, whether they be food, drug, mass, and we got into the stores where we did business. I have found just as much from getting into stores where I may not do business. So I might not have a current business today in Ulta. I might not have a current business today in Sephora, but I would want to get into those environments to understand what it is they're doing that I might be able to bring over into my environment.
Yep. Peter, I think that's great advice. And I think what held true back then certainly holds true even more so today. And I think what you have just shared would certainly echo and be seconded by the retailers that may be listening today to bring the best people forward for them to be calling on them. Peter, one of the things I've always admired about you is the ability to build relationships. You do it better than everyone. And what I'm curious to know is, what are business relationships? What do relationships look like today as part of the transformation induced by the pandemic? And how should a young person today build and nurture those? I mean, my son is working at home mostly, and he's kind of lost that human contact a little bit, hanging around the hoop, the water cooler. So what do the young people need to do today to nurture and build those relationships?
So first, I thank you for your comment. I think relationships have to be the same regardless of where they are. Let's start there. So whether it's a relationship in your life that matters or whether it's a relationship in business that you want to build, relationships are built on the same fundamentals. And the fundamentals are, you have to be open, you have to be honest, you have to be transparent, you have to be consistent, you have to be willing to listen, and you have to be willing to take as well as give advice. I think what I would do today if I was in a home-based environment working remote, you mentioned it, you were just at a show in New York at the Javits Center. I would try to find ways to run into my customers and to others in the industry. If they had a 1 or 2 day requirement, companies now coming back are saying you have to be in the office 1 day, 2 days, I would go in 3 days. And the reason I would do it is relationships are built face to face, whether it's through this means or whether it's built through the water cooler, as you mentioned it. The reality is relationships are built face to face. And I was just back in New York last week doing something for my former company. I had the opportunity to re-engage with a lot of people that I've not seen for a couple of years, and it was wonderful. And it was wonderful because face to face, we have time to talk about things that matter in our personal lives as well as our professional lives. So I think although people may be, and our one son was working from home, I would encourage him to get out, to encourage his management to meet for a cup of coffee. The world is opening up a little bit better than it was a year or two ago. I think the opportunity to get out to a show, the opportunity to engage, this idea of getting together came from you and I seeing each other at NACDS Annual. Those types of meetings, NACDS, I think you have to get out, you have to walk the floor, you have to put out your hand, and you have to be willing to engage those people you want to meet. So no different than when you're trying to start a relationship on a personal level. You have to be open, and you have to be vulnerable, and you have to be willing to go out and meet people.
That's great, Peter. Thank you for that. And you are an industry leader. You have led in your company. You lead in the industry. You work with lots of leaders. So, what are the 3 characteristics every leader needs to have today? And most importantly, what are the critical leadership traits needed in the future?
So that's a great question. I think some traits will be in the future as they were in the past. I think some traits will have to evolve with leaders. But on the basis of leadership, what I look at are the following things, right? Leaders need to build trust in those that they're given to lead. So in order to build trust, you have to have some really important consistent traits. One is you have to be willing to listen. Two is you have to have empathy, you have to have humility, and you have to have a willingness to ask questions. And one thing I've noticed, Wayne, when it comes to great leaders, they ask a question. And based on your answer, the follow-up question is always a tougher question to answer because it's testing what it is that you've said and your conviction to your beliefs. So I think leaders are great listeners. They ask great questions. I also think that, they look at the opportunity to set the example. And it's common sense to say lead by example, but they set the example. And then last, I was told this back in 1980, my last day of training for my first sales job. I looked at Terry Farney, who was my trainer at the Bennett Company. And I said, Terry, what makes a good manager? Because that would be my first opportunity to lead. And he said, they are consistent and they are fair. And I think that's important. Teams will see right through any favoritism that is played to other employees. Teams will look for you to be inconsistent. Teams will try to find ways to look at you and figure out, are you the real deal? And you do that by example. Time and time again, consistency wins relative to the future. I think leaders have to be willing to listen to things they would never listen to before and to try things that maybe they tried before that didn't work. I've often heard we tried that, it didn't work here. Well, it might be time to try it again. And the reason is timing matters. And sometimes the greatest inventions are not on point. And then you go down the road and, 20 years later, they become commonplace. So I think leaders need to also be willing to go out into different environments and find talent wherever it is. I think right now, our industry on many, many levels struggles to find and retain talent. And that's because in a world that's impatient, and when you think about technology, you want an answer right away. You text somebody, they don't get back to you, you're upset. The reality is that things have become more and more impatient. So people in their careers tend to be more and more impatient, and they want change at God's speed. And if you started today and you were early in career and you figured you had a 40 or 50-year run, it's up to you. You call the ball. You have to realize you have time to get it right. You don't have to get it right now, right? You have to get it right over time. So I think patience, and I constantly coach my children and say, listen, what is it you're seeking for a new opportunity? Because oftentimes they say, I want a new job opportunity. What is it you're seeking? And have you checked with your current company to see if that's available there? Because at the end, I think the most important advice I could give to early in career individuals is that you are responsible for your career. Your manager is not responsible for your career. They're responsible for providing you an environment to have a career. You manage your own career. You lead by example for yourself and you manage your own career. Don't wait to get promoted. Go out and get promoted is what I always say to people.
Peter, that's great advice and certainly aligned to the art of the possible, because anything is possible. So, Peter, I'm going to throw you a curveball kind of at the last question here. So I know you're busy with the current company you're involved with. I know you're doing some projects in the industry. I know you're still currently engaged with your prior employer at Colgate Palmolive Company. What are you doing in your free time? What are you doing? I know you have some grandkids now, but what are you doing for inspiration, fun? Are you reading any good books? Are you watching any good Netflix? What are you doing along those lines?
That's a great question. So first and foremost, I'm getting an opportunity to be a father again, and that's a grandfather, right? So when you do what we did and when you traveled like I traveled, you miss some things along the way. And the learning is that you get to relive them again through your grandchildren. Now, it's not the same because there are boundaries and, it starts the day they're born, you don't get to name them, right? So the reality is as you have grandchildren, you get to watch them and enjoy them. I'm spending time doing things around certain programs that give back to the community. As you know, I'm an outdoorsman, I'm a golfer. I still am involved in scouting. I do merit badges that I like to do for the kids. Last count, we've got 42 Eagle Scouts that have come through some of our programs, and I'm pretty proud of that. And I with regards to Netflix, some of my shows have been ending, like Ozarks, right? I mean, that was a good show, and it ended. And So I've really fallen in love with Ted Lasso. I don't know if people watch that, but it's got all the rave reviews, and I've been watching Ted Lasso, and just trying to find time to be a better husband, a good grandfather, and a better person. And I'm coaching with a couple of my companies, some early in career individuals, and there's no greater joy than stepping back and watching them succeed. So that's pretty much what's keeping me busy, and we travel as much as we can. It's harder to travel these days, but we still jump in a car and we'll go out to Chicago and go down to Florida and see friends.
Peter, I really appreciate your time today. I've always admired your leadership and your charisma and your relationship building opportunities. And it was a pleasure getting with you today and sharing some of your wisdom and the possibilities that young people have in our industry. It's been a great industry. It's been a great career for me. I know it's been a fantastic career for you. And I think clearly being involved in this industry is a lot of fun. It's ever changing, it's dynamic, it's consumer driven. And your words of wisdom, I hope, will resonate with those people that are listening today. So, Peter Thompson, great to see you again. Thank you for your time and conversation. And certainly, I'm sure we'll be seeing each other around the hoop at some point real soon. So, have a great rest of your summer, and we'll chat soon.
I thank you, Wayne. Thanks for the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of others. That's really what we're trying to do. Appreciate
Great.
it.
Great.